Resuming debate, the honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So today's motion is one for the production of documents arising from the refusal of this government to allow the PBO to release information that he had seen, that supported the conclusions that he had drawn, that the overwhelming majority of Canadians are worse off under the carbon tax when the economic impacts of the carbon tax are taken into effect. So this was the latest in the series over time of the carbon tax cover-up. And, you know, one of the Liberal member from Whitby, I think, thought he had a gotcha moment at committee with the PBO, and that he was going to get the PBO to admit that that you know, even when you do take into account the economic impacts, that somehow this that the carbon tax was not harmful to Canadians. But that was where the PBO, who was having none of it, revealed that he had seen the government's data and that the data from the government had supported his conclusions. And the member for Charleswood, St. James Headingley Assiniboia tried to get the PBO to ask the PBO, can we see this information? The PBO affirmed at committee that he had been gagged and that the government was preventing an officer of Parliament from releasing the government's own data. So this is the latest in a pattern that this government has exhibited for 9 years now of secrecy by default, of obfuscation, of cover-up, and we've seen this over and over and over again in a whole series of files, Madam Speaker. And, you know, this is, I'd like to remind the members of the Liberal caucus who were elected in 2015. They went door to door with their Real Change, open and transparent government platform. They took it to Canadians in 2015, Madam Speaker, and said, quote, "It's time to shine more light on government and ensure that it remains focused on the people it is meant to serve. Government and its information should be open by default. Data paid for by Canadians belongs to Canadians. We will restore trust in our democracy, and that begins with trusting Canadians." Madam Speaker, what a sick joke after 9 years of secrecy, cover-up, and an absolute contempt for Canadians and their access to information. I've spent quite a bit of time in my time here on the Privacy, Access to Information and Ethics Committee, studied access to information a couple of times, and it is appalling the level of secrecy that this government continues to insist on. We have seen this. We saw this with the Winnipeg Labs, Madam Speaker, where they spent years suppressing information, where they actually named the Speaker of the House in a lawsuit. They went that far to sue the Speaker to stop the release of documents in contempt of Parliament. These are the depths. And then eventually, kicking and screaming in that episode, they eventually table a document and then demand or seek the enormous or extraordinary credit for their supposed commitment to access to information. We've seen this in the ATIP system, which I've also studied at both the Defense Committee and Access to Privacy, Ethics, and Access to Information Committees. The government, when it was elected, brought in an access to information bill that they claimed was in furtherance of that election promise that I had read earlier. The Information Commissioner of the day said it was a step backwards, that they actually proactively changed the law to make access to information worse in this country, Madam Speaker. And so here we are on the morning of an opposition day where Conservatives put forward a production order to ensure that Canadians can get the truth about the government's own information that it possesses as it misleadingly tells Canadians that the carbon tax is somehow good for them, they dumped the documents literally moments before the opposition leader moved our opposition motion and spoke to it. And again, in debate, want extraordinary credit. Like, well, boy, why are we debating this motion? You know, we gave them this information. Madam Speaker, of course they gave the information only because this motion was on notice and was going to be debated, possibly even supported by the House, and if supported by the House, would result in another contempt motion if they would not, or would have held them in contempt if they wouldn't comply with a production order. That's the MO of this government. The idea that they can suppress and hold on to information and conceal the cost of the carbon tax from Canadians.